we're now recording. So whenever you're Rachel ready,
Okay.
we can start our interview.
Green. How do you say your last name?
Gruber.
Gruber. Okay. Okay. Well,
All
good.
set, Ralph? Okay, we're gonna start. Rachel's gonna give a little lead-in,
A little introduction.
and then we'll be ready to go. Okay, go ahead. Back to you,
All right.
Rachel.
All right. So good morning. Today is August 6th, 2018, and today we are conducting an interview for the Veterans Project. And here we have Ralph Rossman, and my name is Rachel Mavros, and here we also have Christine Gruber, and we are located at Westminster Village in Bloomington, Illinois. So, Ralph, just to start off, when were you born, and what branch of service did you serve in?
I was born June the 25th in 1921 on a farmhouse near Bunnock, Illinois, and I was drafted in 1942 into the Army.
Okay.
So I was 21 at that time.
And you were drafted.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What were your early days of service like in training?
In training?
Yeah.
Well, I took my basic training down in Camp Landing, Florida, and then after basic we were sent to Camp Forest, Tennessee, and we lived in a tent city there because there were so many troops. All of the barracks were full, so we lived in tent city for a while, and then in the fall of 43, while we maneuvered for 2 months in Tennessee, and then after that we went up to Camp Atterbury, Indiana, and got ready to be shipped overseas. We left there in February and shipped out to Camp Miles Standish near Boston, and we boarded the USS Argentina on February the 12th on Lincoln's birthday and landed in Scotland on Washington's birthday. And then we got on a train and went right down to Wagner Regis, and for a while we lived in civilian houses because there were so many troops over there. They didn't have room in the camp to put all the troops. Mm. So while we were there, we maneuvered with an armored unit, and the trucks come in one day, and they said that we were going to maneuver with them, and it happened to be my brother's unit, and he was over there, and I hadn't seen him for about 2 years. And when the trucks come in the next day, I asked the driver, I said, you know where my brother's outfit is? And he said, yeah, well, the convoy drove probably an hour or so, had stopped, and he hollered in the back, here's where your brother is. Before I had my pup tent pitched, he was already down there. He had checked the advance party the night before, and so I got to see him for a little while there. And then when the invasion started, I went in on Omaha Beach 8 days after D-Day, June the 14th. I was wounded the 9th of July, and I was paralyzed from the waist down, and they put me on a stretcher, and I was flown back to England, and I was put in traction over the back of the bed, and the weights over the back of the bed, and the paralysis evidently wore off because here I am, I'm 97, I'm still alive. So I guess somebody up above said maybe it's not time to go yet, I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyhow,
how long did that last?
After I was in the hospital till December, and then they broke through on the Battle of the Bulge, and I was to go out limited service according to the doctor in England. When I got over in France Depot, evidently the Germans had broke through on the Battle of the Bulge, and they handed me my M1, and I went right back to my unit on the Battle of the Bulge. And at that time there was only about 4 of my original unit that I had basic training with and went overseas together. And one of my buddy in the headquarters, and he was company cook, he says, Ralph, you don't belong here, you've been in the hospital for 6 months. And well, they sent me back. So he talked to company commander, he says, tell Ralph to go on sick call in the morning, see what they tell him. There was 2 feet of snow on the ground, and naturally being in the hospital for 6 months, it was quite a challenge. So I went on sick call, and they sent me back, and I got reclassified. And I worked in the base post office near Essens in Corbeil, France. And they would come in boxcars of mail, and there was so many veterans over there that we had to try to forward the mail or send back to sender or whatever. So that pretty well took care of it till I worked there till November of 45, and then I got sent back to out of Marseille, France, and took us 20 days to go back from Marseille to Brooklyn. And when I went by the Statue of Liberty, it says I made it. So that's pretty well. I got discharged on the 16th of December in Camp Grant. So that's pretty well the history of where I was in service.
Right.
And you brought some artifacts with you. I think maybe we can show these, or Ralph can hold them up.
Okay.
And let's see. I know you. This is your dog tag, the one they threw on the stretcher that you were carried out on after you were wounded. And here we've got some pieces of shrapnel that came from Ralph's wounds.
Yeah, these are the two pieces that went in it. They went in this side of my neck, and they took them out. When I come to after surgery in England, well, I had this gauze on my arm, and I asked the fellow in the next bed to me, I says, I wonder what that is. He says, it's probably what they took out of you. So I looked at it, and it was this shrapnel. So I still kept it as a souvenir. So
Wow.
I have a little in me in this arm, and I got a little of my dog tag chain in the hole over here.
Still.
Yeah.
Oh my.
So,
And you didn't even realize what it was at first,
well,
or where it came from.
no, I didn't know that, that they had saved it or anything, but they took me in to do surgery and take it out or whatever, and I figured they'd throw it away, but evidently the doctor, whoever it was, they taped it on my arm, and I found it in there.
Wow.
So,
Tell us more about that whole experience. What did that feel like going through?
well,
Because I couldn't
think
imagine it.
I think it just hit me, and I was half out, I think, half conscious and half, I don't know what saved me from bleeding to death, because a buddy of mine from Pennsylvania laid me down along the hedgerows, and I thought I laid there just a short time, but I run into my first sergeant back in England. He said I laid there 5 to 6 hours before they got up me. They put me on a stretcher and flew me back to England, and that's when he took that out over there. So I don't know how long the paralysis lasts, but it wore off eventually.
Right.
But the telegram that my mother received when I was wounded was dated the August the 1st, and I was wounded the 9th of July. But she received a letter, the nurse that was really taking care of me, she wrote a letter to my mother, and my mother received that letter before she received the telegram saying I was seriously wounded. So she knew that, she didn't know how it was, because you couldn't tell a whole lot. Your mail was censored, and they'd cut out things you weren't supposed to write in there. And I'm trying to think what I was going to say.
Now you were in England in the hospital. Was it an American hospital?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was
So
68th General Hospital is where they flew me back to. And then after I was up and around, I got transferred to one over by Liverpool. And this wound wasn't healing, so they said they might have to skin graft or something. Well, finally it healed, and then I got discharged.
Okay.
And that's when I was sent back to my unit again. But,
Okay. Great.
So that's a long time ago. That's my history as far as the Army was concerned. It wasn't that I wanted to be, but everybody was drafted at that time. And of course, I was, besides seeing my brother in England, I saw him once in Paris, France. I was working in that post office, and I could get up to Paris on a pass more or less whenever I wanted. And I had taken a furlough back to England because I knew some people over there, and I got back, and the first sergeant said, your brother's calling you. And when I called him, he says, take a pass and go up soon. So we spent a couple of days in Paris before he was to ship back to the States. He had a lot more points than I did because he was drafted before Pearl Harbor. So he passed away about 2 years ago, but he made it over 100. But he was with the 3rd Armored Division over there, and he went all the way through, never got hit or anything. But so some of the souvenirs that I have from there is some that he picked up along the way, and then he gave me.
Right.
So.
Did you serve in France your entire time of service?
Did I?
Were you in France the whole time?
Well, no, just I landed on Omaha Beach the 14th of June.
Okay.
And then I got wounded the 9th of July.
Right.
So they flew me back to the hospital to England.
Okay.
And then after I got out, 6 months after I was over there in the hospital in December, That's when they sent me back to France.
Okay.
And then that's where I was reclassified and started working in that post office over there.
Okay.
So then I ended up being that post office in the post office back here for 37 years of my Army time.
So when you were discharged,
In Camp Grant,
okay, and then you made your way back to Illinois.
I got the bus from Rockford and went back to Minocqua, Illinois, where I was born and raised.
Okay.
Got off the bus, and a friend of mine took me out to the farmland where I was born and raised. So my mother was there yet, and my brother that had been doing the farming. My dad was deceased.
Oh. So what did you do after the war?
Well, I started working first for this implement dealer, and then I had a chance to get in the post office, so I took that. And then I stayed with the post office with my Army time. I had 37 years. But I retired longer than I worked. That's, I guess, because I'm 97 years old.
Now you mentioned before we started our interview that you'd been on an honor flight.
Yeah, I took the honor flight about 4 or 5 years ago, and my daughter that lives here, she was my escort. And we went down to the Land of Lincoln was the honor flight out of Springfield.
Mm-hmm.
So we went down there the night before and stayed, and the VFW down there had a feed, and then we had to get up at 4:30 in the next morning and get the plane out, and we landed on LaGuardia Field in New York, and then in Washington D.C. or whatever, and saw all of the different the World War II museum and the Iwo Jima, the Korean deal. So they had these out there. It almost looks natural. Those people out there in that memorial out there, and then he took us out to the Air Force Museum and Arlington National Cemetery, changing the guard. So it was a big day. We finally got home, and I got home we come back to Springfield, and of course they had the bagpipes and everything, and a lot of people there greeting us when we come back. And I got back to, then I got back to home at 1:30 the next morning, so it was a big long day. It was a tired day, but it was good.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Can you tell us more about this letter in front here?
You mean, what's this?
Yeah,
This?
the letter you have here.
Oh, well, I just wrote down some of the things that I think I told you more or less.
Okay.
So I wouldn't forget them, but I don't know. The base post office where I was at there in France was near Essens in Corbeil, France, which is about 30 miles from Paris. And that's being a young guy, why we'd get a pass to Paris every once in a while, chasing around. So.
Did you keep in touch with friends after the military?
Pardon?
Did you keep in touch with any friends after the military?
There was 3 of us that went all the way through basic, all the way through combat, and all 3 of us were wounded. One was from Pennsylvania, one was from Milwaukee. About 2 years ago, the one from Milwaukee passed away, and the one from Pennsylvania, I was sending my new address because we had just moved in from North Normal to Westminster, and I sent him my new address right away. He called me. He was the one that laid me down in the hedgerows and gave me the pills that we carried and sprinkled sulfur on my wound. And I don't know what he probably saved my life by laying me down along the hedgerows, because it was kind of a little water or something in that, and I guess it maybe cooled my body down enough that I didn't bleed to death or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then we still correspond back and forth, and our families have kind of got together, or at least the 6 of us, the one from Milwaukee and his wife, and the one from, they're both deceased, the one in Milwaukee, but the ones in Pennsylvania are still alive.
Do you belong to any veterans organizations?
Oh, I belong to the DAV, the VFW, and the American Legion honor, all through our honorary members. Now, I've been with them so long.
Then, do you have any just lessons you think you've learned over your time serving? Anything that has changed your worldview? Any lessons?
I tell you, war is crazy, and we're still, even all of these wars that we fought, we're still fighting all over the world. I don't know how we're going to change those people over there. And this country gets involved in everything, and young guys usually, and or young gals now, and why? Sometimes you wonder why. Why it goes on.
Do you have any advice to people going to join the military or currently
Pardon?
serving now? Would you give any advice to anyone currently serving? Any advice that you have?
Well, I suppose what they have to do is, as their company commander says what they have to do. While we were in England, before the invasion started, Eisenhower come around and gave us a talk, and Montgomery, British man, come around and gave us a talk. Of course, they're way back, you know, the guy that's out there fighting is a little guy on the end of the rifle. I had my M1 rifle, my anti-tank grenade with 3 anti-tank grenades, 2 bandoliers of ammunition, and my sidearms of ammunition. I think it probably weighed more than I did.
Are there any other memories that you would wish to share with us?
Well, I never thought I would be a soldier when I grew up to be a farm boy, but it happened that way. There was very few that weren't drafted back in my age, and there's very few of us alive today. I think it's less than 1 million World War II veterans are alive yet today. So I'm sure in the next several years it's going to clean out a lot more of us, because age-wise, I had my heart doctor, I had bypass about 10 years ago, and I've been going to rehab for twice a week, and I told my heart doctor, I said, you know, my brother made it, I'm not sure I'll make it. He says, yes, you will, I'll help you. So I don't know if he's going to put in a new heart or whether he's going to keep this one ticking. So.
When you had your leave opportunities, when you were in France, you said you went to Paris. What kind of things did you do? Did you visit some of the museums or have a good time with your buddies?
Well, yeah, his buddy there had the, what they call it, the rainbow. I saw Glenn Miller's band, you know, they had different things over in England, and of course he got, he had passed away, you know, his plane got disappeared when he was going from England to France.
Yeah.
And Ray McKinley had taken over his band at that time, and he was, so, and you know, we do different things over there. And went to Carnival. I got a couple of pictures of me and my buddy standing there with 2 French gals, but we just had the picture taken with us all.
Did you bring any souvenirs back for your mother or your siblings?
Well, you know, in the infantry you couldn't take too much back, but some of the stuff that I had are what my sister was living with my mother because they had a child, and her husband was in the Navy, so she kept all of this stuff that I wrote, all the letters I wrote back, and she got the cup. And you know, the letters that we wrote over there, we wrote on a regular sized paper, and then they photographed and they called it emails, so they were only about this big. And the reason they did that, they needed the room to haul them back. There was so many troops over there that they needed space to reduce them. So the pictures that I got of the emails that I have are only about this big, but of course it's reduced from this size. So,
It'd be very tiny.
yeah, it's kind of hard. You almost need a magnifying glass to read them, and they're so small.
Did your family write to you often when you went back to your unit?
Well, they'd write probably once a week or so, but it was maneuvers in Tennessee. We were going to dig a foxhole for the tanks to run over us, and the buddy and I, we had just a shovel that we carried, and if you ever tried to dig a foxhole in Tennessee, you need a pick. So the 2 buddies next to us had a pick, so we hollered and says, we need a pick. He threw it and he bounced and it caught me right here. You see that scar up there? That's the first scar I got from being in service.
Oh my.
The pick hit me right on the forehead. So.
What else have we got? Did during the war in your family was farming in the Minonk area.
Yeah.
Did they have any difficulties getting supplies that they needed in order to farm, or did they have exemptions where they didn't have to face the rationing that other folks did?
Well, of course, back then it was mostly by horses.
Oh,
You know, we had I think we ended up getting a row tractor, but mostly the farming was done with tractors. I can remember planting one field. My dad was deceased, and my brother was doing the farming, and we were farming 280 acres. And my brother says, well, maybe you better at least plant one field of corn. So I planted one field of corn behind a 2-row planter behind 2 horses. And now if you go down the highway, you got about 16 or 18 or 24 rows and a great big tractor. So that's how much farming has changed too over a period of time. So
what kind of things did your family grow on their farm?
back then it was just corn and wheat and oats and alfalfa. There was no beans at that time.
Right.
So
Okay.
yeah.
Did you have cattle or any other livestock?
Yeah, we had pigs, and we had about 8 cows, had to milk the cows. So, and walked 2 miles to a one-room country school. To get my high school education, I hitchhiked about 5 miles out in the country. Graduated in '39 from Minonk High. I was 48 in my class, so that was a pretty good sized class at that time, from that sized town. So
after the war, you came back and you started your work with the post office. When did you get married?
we got married in 1956.
Okay.
So I was 34 at the time. So,
And where'd you settle? Where'd your family settle?
well, we settled in Minonk at first because that's where I was on the mail route, and then Nixon supposedly took the post office out of politics, and they started consolidating these gravy train routes, and I was surplus in Minonk. I was a senior employee in the office because I was a junior road carrier, and they only negotiated the contract of the whatever you were, either clerk or carrier or whatever. So I found a vacant route right down here on North Normal, and I carried that out there. And then before we moved here at Westminster, I was living right out there where I carried the mail back in the 70s. So that was quite a challenge at that time because it was all country then. Now it's built up all around it. So.
Going back, in what ways do you think that your military service has impacted your life onward from that?
Well, I suppose if I wouldn't have gone in service, maybe I'd end up being a farmer or something. That's what I was, growing up that way. And then you were lucky back then if you even got a high school education. My wife didn't get one, but she went to night school. She was from over by Peoria. So she went to night school to get her degree from high school. But back then there was very few in college either, too, so comparatively. So.
Alrighty, well, thank you, Ralph, so much for joining us today. Thank you for your service, and we really appreciate you joining us to
You're welcome.
share your
Thank
story.
you. I enjoyed doing it. I hope I told you a little bit about what went on.
You did. Very interesting. And I think you're the first veteran we've talked to that has been wounded in action and even has evidence of your injury. So with your shrapnel, that's wonderful.
Yeah, I think I told you I've got the Purple Heart, the Bronze Star, and the French Legion of Honor.
Oh,
Yeah, if you fought on the French soil, well, you could get this award, which is the French Legion of Honor.
okay.
It's a medal and then it has a certificate with it.
And the French were, I think, very, very glad to have American soldiers on their soil.
Yeah. Yeah.
How about the English people when you were in England? Did you come in contact with many local people did they work in the hospital or anything?
Not a whole lot, because he was just the nurses and everything in the hospital were American nurses, and
Oh, okay.
yeah, They were over there. I think this one that helped take me and wrote the first letter to my mother, I think she was from out east someplace. I have a picture of her, but I often wondered why I didn't contact her right after the war to see how she come out, but I didn't do it. But she'd come in at night and talk to me, and I was in a separate room on the end of the ward because of the fact that I was in this traction. And so they were dedicated, the nurses. They, when I got, before they flew me back to England, why they just cleaned out this wound as best they could and bandaged it up. But before it healed up, I wondered whether I was rotting away. It's just the smell from the drainage. And if it wouldn't have been on account of penicillin, I'm not sure I'd be here today, because penicillin was just started at that time. And they'd come in and give me a shot about every 4 hours to rebuke the infection or whatever. So.
Wow. Very good. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us. We really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you. All right. How do you pause it?
This one over here. I'm gonna get the microphone off of Ralph.
I think I told you that was so 30th Infantry Division I was with, didn't I? I think I did.
Yeah, I think you did too. And we've got a nice picture of this, and let me put your goodies back here. Yeah, it's too bad we didn't know whatever happened to your other dog tag.
Maybe it's buried in France someplace.
It probably is. But you have that. And let me get this off your collar, and thank you so much. And here, let me put this into your hand so you don't get caught up in it. Great. Yeah.
I think it's still going.
We just push this button right here.